We're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart when it comes to smart cities and IoT, and that is security. And there's only two types of companies when it comes to breaches. Those that have been breached and those that don't know that they've been breached yet. Okay? And just to give you an example, why we were sitting back here and Jack was talking, so Jack, I'm sorry, I texted our IT department to ask him a couple of quick questions. So I asked him, how many times is BlueStar's network being pinged for someone to get into our system or to load up just 30 ports in a 2-week period? Any guesses? Anybody? 702 million. Now, if you take our BlueStar, which is our ordering portal, in 2 weeks' time, and this is just for North America and Latin America, we have around 8,000, 8,500 customers that are going there to do their ordering online. But there's 20 million other people who are going there trying to get access to our online ordering system, which, guess what? Takes credit cards. So security, and it's come up in discussion. Jack even brought it up talking about what's being done with all the new upgrades that are coming out with Android and such. So what we wanted to do was to bring up all of our speakers and ask them a few questions about security. And the thing is that each of them has a little bit different view into smart cities, IoT. You know, it's like going to a house, and some people go in the front door, some people come in the back door, they look in the window, they might slide down the chimney. But that is a different view than everybody else. And so I think what's going to be unique about this is that there's no right answers in any of this. But it helps give insight to where do we go with security. The second thing is, and I brought up some questions over the last day and a half, and that is, how many of you in the audience are resellers? Raise your hand. How many resellers are there? Come on, there's more than just that. Come on, raise your hands. Okay. So when you look at the resellers that are in the room, and you're going to get involved into smart cities, heavily into IoT, what we want to help you do is when you make that first step is to make that first step in the right direction. That you don't step off to the right when you should have gone left to help facilitate building a new revenue stream or such. So I'd like the panelists to sort of keep that in mind as we're talking now. What are some of these gold nuggets? What have you seen fail and what have you seen work? Because at the end of the day, one of the keys in business is to fail fast and then try again real fast and succeed fast. So let's start out and talk about a few things about, and I got to put my glasses on here. I want to talk about the smart cities where, you know, right now, according to the UN, there's half of the population that lives in urban areas, but 2/3 of it in just a couple of decades is going to be all in urban areas. And then for you that went on the tour and they said how many people lived in those streets, that was pretty crowded. Think of how crowded the streets are going to be in all these urban areas in just a couple of decades. So one of the problems that you have with an IoT is that it increases the number of devices that you have to protect that are on the other side of the firewall, right? So 10 years ago, what we had to worry about was our computers. And 5 years ago, it was all of our phones. And now it's about cars, digital signage. It can be about any of these sensors or any of these beacons that we have out there that are measuring temperature. Could be for GPS, for movement. So the question becomes, from your area of expertise and where you folks look at smart cities, what's the number one area or thing that the resellers should be concerned about in regards to security in building out their own solutions? Since you have the microphone, you're first.
Yes, shall I start? I took the microphone, so I will break the ice. Well, that's a very good question. I think there is not just one big issue when we talk about the smart cities. But if I could have to put or to choose one, I would say critical infrastructure, and to try to protect these critical infrastructures for unintended access. I mean, we are now moving from a scenario in which, let's say, internet connectivity was quite limited in terms of services for the city, to a scenario in which all the services will be heavily depend on these IoT technologies, on these devices connected to the internet. So unintended access to critical infrastructure can be a mess, I think, in the city. For example, I don't know, just thinking about traffic lights. If we are developing a solution in order to effectively change the traffic light depending on the traffic status of the city, we have to be pretty sure that we are not letting anyone going into this infrastructure, because it can occur the biggest mess in the city you can have. And then the people will start complaining, the citizens will get mad, because maybe they are even getting injured, and this will be complete damage. So from a point of view, it's securing access to the IoT that you are deploying for critical infrastructure would be #1 priority. And it should be also, because even probably not everyone is aware about this, should be an important must, let's say, in that sense.
Okay, Susanna? Oh,
sorry.
Okay, I think somehow I'm obliged to mention supply chain as one of the areas, more critical areas in terms of security. So supply chain has a lot of inefficiencies and is subject to thefts, it's subject to accidents, it's subject to terrorism as well. So I think it's a critical area in terms of security. We perform one project. I'm not an expert on security, but some of my professors, they are, and I can briefly describe that we run a project with a postal service, on several countries around Europe, and I guess that now with the Internet of Things and those new technologies, we can even protect our life. Considering that we are talking about terrorism and those attacks that there were attacks with anthrax in the US a few years ago, and there are some explosives sent via postal, ordinary postal service. And I think that we are facing now new technologies that help to protect our lives. So there are several technologies, as I found from a project like sniffers, like an electronic nose, just to smell explosives and so on. There are some other technologies like image detecting and so on. So they may help us. So I guess that is a critical. That's a critical point on security, but also we have alternatives and we have solutions to face with this, to tackle this.
thank you. Justin?
Yeah, hi. So purely from a digital signage background, because that's why I'm here, I'm slightly different from you guys. What we've noticed, and what I believe you will notice more and more in the future, is that historically people have been very protective of their data, and they've kept that on-premise, okay? But because of, let's say, embedded players inside of the screens today, or because of the cloud, obviously, that's opened up digital signage enormously, but it's also opened up the risk. You know, there's a security risk there, because you've got often not just employee data, you've got end users data, or often people who are subscribed to your organization. And what we're seeing, and I believe we will see more and more, is both enterprise organizations, governments, and people who value that data and value their customers. They will move towards a hybrid model and the way that they treat that data. So very sensitive data they will only keep on-premise, on their own servers, and that will be very locked down behind a firewall protected. And other data which is obviously less important or is less potentially sensitive to the public, that will be on the cloud. So they'll run like a mixed level of security there. You can already see that within some of our customers today, and although it's not specifically smart city, you can see obviously, financial institutions, they'll run some of their data purely behind, on-premise and behind a firewall, but then other data which is not so important and is for public consumption, it doesn't really matter, it's out there, it's on the cloud. So I think that's an area which will be very much more under control. And there's perhaps another area where encryption, definitely, we're already noticing a lot of our clients are demanding more and more sophisticated levels of encryption, and where we specialize is in building adapters and collecting engines to take their data and to encrypt it on both ends. Yeah. So they're not just interested in, as it were, what you're taking, but more importantly, where it's going. And there are some things that we can't control. That's true. So in other words, screens or where things are being done at the end of that collection process that we can't control. So it's not perfect, although people would like it to be. But the more and more you can encrypt that data and keep it under complete lockdown and control with a dedicated collection engine and how we service that within our CMS, that's really important for customers.
Okay. There you go.
You can minimize the risk, but you cannot eliminate the risk. So security is like that. So when we want to select a technology tool for IoT application, it's important to have high strong algorithms of encryptations, also for authentications. So this can minimize the risk of attacks, but also is very important to select technology that can be divided on the processor part. So one thing that is coming on the IoT, it's the edge computing. So edge computing technology allow that on the edge part to have local processing and not depending on the communication side. Imagine if there is an attack of denial of service on a specific IoT devices. There is no communications with IoT devices, but the devices needs to work. You need to know what you need to do. So to have this kind of technology can minimize the risk of something will be blocked or working.
Okay, thank you. So the one thing that we want to remember when we do this is an open session. We don't have to wait to the end for any of your questions. Just raise your hand and Baco will come by with the microphone and you can ask a question anytime during this. We sent out some of the questions to the panelists to give them an idea of what we wanted to discuss, but if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll call on you. This term came up, we brought it up yesterday, system of systems. And then when we went on the tour, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the perfect example of it. Because when you say system of systems, here you have all this convergence of all these different technologies, new and old, and then you have all this infrastructure that could be new or old. So some of the new city, or some of the smart cities are brand new from the ground up, others are old. But think about what it took to put in digital signage and video down in the tour that we just took, because how do you drill through, and we talked about a little bit, the horsehair, plaster, stone, and everything else to have that happen. So think about that when you go to smart cities, and we call those, when you have this convergence of technologies in the infrastructure, we call those blind spots. And people who master blind spots, which are challenges, usually have great opportunities. So there's an old saying, where there's mystery, there's margin. And if you can solve the mysteries, you make the margin. So in the smart city, when we're talking about blind spots or where these real difficult areas are, but you're seeing people go out and address them, Some of them might be called cutting edge, but they're getting to the point where they have a revenue stream that they're making profits by going after. What would be some of these blind spots that you folks are seeing that there are challenges, but there's tremendous amount of opportunities for our resellers to go out and put a solution to solve those?
Well, we at Domatica, we analyze the systems of systems,
Right.
and we detected that is a huge protocols, a huge type of sensors in the market. There is a Modbus, .NET, KNX, there's a huge systems. And we understand that we cannot cut the connection to these systems. So we find out that it's important to have a technology that can aggregate all these devices, all these protocols. And that's what we are doing with our technology. So this is you have one system that can connect to multi protocols, and it allows you to build solutions on top with one channel, not to have any gateways, any more than one gateway or converted systems. So this is what we are doing regarding the situation of the protocols and the complexity of these all protocols. So the market is reacting very well because they have one system that can be connected to multi systems.
Okay. Don't keep the microphone for a second. So when you were up there and you were talking, I asked a question about the ISVs or people bringing their solutions to you. If the resellers in the room have a solution that they want to come and put into a smart city, into the public sector, maybe they were in the private sector before, now want to go in the public sector, is that a service that your company offers that they could partner with you and you would help them take that product to market in the smart city arena?
So yes, the answer is yes. So what we do is we aggregate information, but we don't make any data visualization, any data analytic. We deliver the data for third parties to do the work. Okay, so that's why it's an opportunity for them to use our technology, because we are only supply information, and of course they need to do analytics or interfacing on dashboards over the data that we deliver.
Okay. So your table tonight at dinner should be full of resellers, right?
Yes.
Okay. Justin?
Yeah, I would say with digital signage, something which we see a lot more today, and it's really on the crest of it, is people there's like a rationalization out there. So you've got a lot of what we call legacy products. So you've got a lot of people who have invested large sums of money in screens, whether it be LED or whether it be smaller screens, meeting room signage, all sorts of areas, and they've bought sometimes one software from one company. They bought one type of screen. Then they've tried to invest in, let's say, WebOS or Tizen through a Samsung or an LG, and now in the future they want everything to be on cloud. And what people are finding very difficult, and where we fit in and where we fill all those holes, is that we are pretty much agnostic. We work across the whole spectrum of product, whether it be a mobile. So our signage we've developed for the future to work on mobile technology. So that when somebody's sending out messaging, let's say, to their employees in the public sector, rather than them receiving that as an email or receiving that, let's say, on their desktop, they can get it through their mobile and they can send internal comms out through that mobile channel. But it's equally understanding that people can't just ditch that old product because they've invested a lot of money in it. So there needs to be a little bit like I said to you before, there needs to be the capability for our CMS to literally run a completely mixed network of product. It doesn't matter if it's an LED screen or if it's a mobile or if it's an NEC screen that's got Android behind it or Raspberry Pi or whatever it be. So that's another area with signage where you've also got different if you take the kind of the public sector, you've got different departments going in different directions. Marketing sometimes is going this way, and transport's going that way, and you've got IT. They think they know the best way, and it's all a bit of a mess sometimes. So we have to stand back and to be capable, like I said, of being agnostic and catering for all of those different devices. That's what I would say the most.
So don't pass the mic yet. I know I'm probably jumping ahead because we're going to hear about digital signage later on in the conference, but
Tomorrow.
I have a sort of offshoot question.
Sure.
So digital signage on the wall, non-touch versus kiosk with touch for a lot of interface with the customers, both in retail, smart cities and such. How's that trending?
Absolutely interactive, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's of all of the retail partners that we work with, not just retail for the record, I know I'm here for retail, but for other areas as well. They want to interact with the consumer. They want to be able to gain data, what the consumer likes, what they touch, what they want to see, metrics, all of those things, right? And they want to understand the consumer. They want to really be able to, obviously they need to be able to afterwards capture all of that data and then, for instance, to promote certain products from that, either initially or in the future. But that's definitely, I would say, of all of the larger customers that we have and all the potential projects, the vast majority of those customers in the future will go interactive.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
people are becoming almost kind of, to some degree, a little bit bored with screens, and the loss of that interaction is they're losing the customer.
So then Martin and Cashmere from ELO should be sitting at your table tonight, right?
They know about it. Yeah,
Okay. Why?
Well, the concept of system of systems is can be applied to the city, I think, very well, because we're talking a traditional scenario in which we have very different vertical services that can be related to each other or not. And what I feel is that cities, what they are pursuing is to integrate all these services, at least the method to evaluate how these services are working, if they are performing well or not, etc., in an easy way. So I would see that, I think, let's say, a space of opportunity if you are able to provide this service distribution of the technologies that would be easily integrated it is existing in the city in the sense of how the city can let's say evaluate the performance of the services that you are providing through the installation, etc. And we are having another scenario that is cities are looking also to integrate all of them together, and maybe we were talking yesterday about this smart lighting and the lampposts, etc., and would be a place where to integrate several services, not only, for example, just street lighting, but also communication, integrating Wi-Fi solutions. And if you are able to provide, for example, one procurement, one service, not just, okay, I'm integrating lighting with you, but I'm also providing a solution that will connect your citizen easily with you by providing Wi-Fi services, by providing a place to charge the battery of the electrical cars that will be coming in the future, etc. So this system of system integration, as good as we are to be able to integrate within these scenarios and within other services, it would be better for the city in order, for example, to choose your solution over other solutions that may come to this, let's say, tender procurements, for example, etc.
So, are the city officials coming to you folks and asking for you to help them in picking providers to put solutions in the smart cities?
Not exactly. We are more in the what we work with them is in the previous phase. Let's say I'm not taking any decision in terms of what the solution to choose. Of course, the city, I think they have the right in order to call to experts, etc. in these things. But in the relation, for example, we have with them through these innovation projects is that to, let's say, to migrate, that's a good word, knowledge to the municipality or to share knowledge with them. Participating with them in this kind of projects, they are getting aware of what is happening, what is the latest trends, and this way they are able to ask through these tender procurements what they need in order to deploy new technologies into the city, and what is the citizens are asking for to integrate new technology and to increase the city capacity and the city livability.
Okay, Doctor?
Okay, I think when talking about mobility as a service, when talking about freight supply chains, I think we still need a kind of a harmonization of strategies. So supply chains are expected to be more visible, they have to be more reliable in the future, we expect to be more agile, flexible. So that's impossible to achieve without any integration, integration of technologies and sharing information. Many of the stakeholders, many of the actors that are part of the supply chain, they haven't shifted, so they need to experience the cultural change. So I can provide some examples. So I guess that in the US is more common than in Europe, and also from Northern Europe to South Europe. There's a huge difference, but culturally speaking, in terms of horizontal collaboration, for instance, where you exchange your data, you share your data, your real-time data, just to increase the load factor of a vehicle, for instance. So there's not much interaction among companies. So we always show the example of P&G, Procter & Gamble, and the Tupperware. So they were sharing their products just to having a full truck load. But when I was trying to negotiate between different logistics operators for the last mile delivery, we didn't get any, we didn't success on that. And I think there's a big cultural change on that.
Okay. So, cyber attacks. So WannaCry, Pedro, you brought up something, and when you were talking about an air freshener, right? So in the United States, Fisher-Price, and maybe there's Fisher-Price here, but they make the little cameras that go into the nurseries, so parents can keep an eye on their children while they're sleeping. And they were manufactured in China, and what they found out was that the Chinese government was spying on the U.S. homes and other homes where these little cameras were being used to watch infants. So you can imagine they switched manufacturers. So you said yours was from China, just asking you. But when you look at all of the cyber attacks, I mean, even the city of Atlanta, Georgia, was hacked recently, and that shut down all types of services throughout the city. You have Russia, North Korea, China are all known for having groups that focus on cyber attacks to just try and break in. Who knows who would have been elected if they hadn't worked on Trump, right? So that was just a joke. So anyway, when you start thinking about this, I mean, and a cyber attack could come through, they could literally shut down the electrical grid. When certain things like that happen, what would happen if someone got into a dictatorship or took control of a city, not just a country, but a city, and they wanted to discontinue the services for everybody? How much turmoil would that put everybody in, right? So I guess how this relates is it all has to do not only with shutting down services, but the stealing of identity. And so we had talked about this as a small group off to the side this morning, but come May 25th, everybody in the room that lives in Europe knows about this, GDPR, right? So someone is finally going to take a stance, and I think it's great that you folks have decided to do this, to say we need to have some type of standards put into place. You know, our industry, if you go back to barcodes, really 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when barcodes were first starting out, someone had to standardize that so that the barcodes would be used uniformly across all different verticals and such. So here's the opportunity now for the folks in Europe to do some of the standardization, and I think it's great, and not everybody may agree with me in the room, but the fines are astronomical. What is it? It's 25%, is that right, of your global revenue? Right? So when you think about this, and I'm curious to what's your involvement been with folks that are trying to get within the guidelines of GDPR now, and are there opportunities for our resellers in the room to add a service model, consulting model, maybe bring in a new type of person to work on their teams to help address this? Because I think this is going to be a lot like PCI, right? Payment card industry came out with a chip and PIN, and that's a global initiative. I can see where this will become a global initiative. So the question is, are there places where you have been working with people about how do they address it, and how are they going about it? So do you go left this way, or do you go right this way to make your first step towards doing it? And are there opportunities for our resellers to find new revenue streams?
Yeah. Very good question, because not myself, but my colleagues, they are working on evaluating risks on the supply chain. And that's a project related to risk security, and they are modeling different scenarios. So by modeling different scenarios, it's quite similar to what the hackers do when testing different systems for the cyber attacks. So they are modeling different scenarios, evaluating the risks, and it allows the stakeholders, the different stakeholders on the supply chain, to compare those risks and to adopt those measures and those innovations that better fits on their systems. So basically this is how it works. And I don't know too much about this, but this methodology may allow both private and the public administrations work together. So in the case of smart cities, for instance, so they allow to simulate different scenarios. They allow assessing both the public and the private sector and work together on that. So that's what we do, and I think that some other research centers, some other technological centers in the world may work on, also technological companies are work on that. So, okay, I think it's promising in the future.
So is MIT getting many more requests coming in from folks saying, how do I deal with this? What do I do? How do I get started?
That was coming from a European project, in fact. And there are many topics related to those kind of cyber attacks, security issues, and so on. So the European Commission is quite concerned about it. And at the same time, they are launching calls related to Internet of Things, physical Internet, and integration of different technologies, smart cities, etc. They are in parallel launching projects and calls related to security and cybersecurity. So they are quite concerned about it, and I think it's a part of the near future, and it's a part of the present and the near future as well.
Sure. Juan?
Well, as you mentioned, that cyber attack it's on the IoT can be massive. I remember back in October 2016, there was this big cyber attack that uses all the IoT devices that were unprotected from all over the world to make massive DDoS attacks, denial of service to other companies. I don't know, I can recall, for example, big service providers that also affected to other services, from video games, not to access to play, to to services on industrial service. So as we're getting more devices, cyber attack possibilities are increased, and we need to be sure to protect these. And I think there are two, it is impossible to mitigate completely the risk of having these cyber attacks, but you need to put in value that you are able to provide a solution that is able to meet with them. In that sense, I would say there are two types. On the one hand, we could say in the smart city, the data leaks. Well, it depends on which data is being leaked. If you are leaking data from temperature sensor, which is placed on the streets or for environmental considerations, it is not an important matter. But if you are having a personal data breach, okay, you are having a problem. So to be sure to put the effort on what is really matter. But we are also talking about economical matters in the sense of the city. We are having some information about the usage of a specific underground parking, and we can know how many cars are parking every day, etc. This data has an economical value in order to put a new parking there, etc. We should be taking care about. The other hand is the physical attacks, in the sense of, as we mentioned before, these critical services or taking control of the different IoT deployment you have. And in that sense, one idea I come up is, we can ask ourselves, are we able to work this solution without the proper internet connectivity? In case of a critical scenario, can we detach these services in a short term time from the internet and keep it working? For example, imagine a future, talking about this fantastic lamppost or the street lights, etc. But what's happening if they are not connected to internet? So we are having a problem here, and we need to realize that we can get attacked and will be, let's say, on that area. And finally, just a short comment about GDPR. I'm not an expert on privacy, but I would say, by now, our model has been working on anonymization, so data we're getting is not dealing with personal data, but if you are able also to provide a solution that meets all the standards, and you have experts on that side, I also think it's a plus for someone that is implementing this solution. You say, okay, having this, not everyone has the possibility to have these experts on this solution, but they don't want to have this problem. We are talking about, about 4% of the global revenue of companies, and also it applies to other entities, and it's a lot of money, but you cannot afford this. So these solutions coming from integrators or from research, etc., that provide these considerations, I think are in a good position in the smart city, let's say, paradigm.
Yeah. One of the things that we're seeing is some of the, take on the payment processing folks that are in our channel. They're actually out offering breach insurance as part of their solution. So if you get breached, you might have a $50,000 or $100,000 or euro or pound insurance contract that you can use to defend yourself. We didn't see those 3 or 4 years ago. And they're saying the only way you can get that is to use this solution that, is this hardware appliance and this software monitoring device for the internet. So sort of similar to what you brought up, but you have to use their solution in both parts of it, the software and the hardware, to do it to get the insurance guarantee. So.
Okay, if I understood you correctly, you mean you get a kind of you need to use both the hardware and the software,
right,
in order to access to this kind of compensation in case of data breach, etc.
Right, because they're in the background monitoring what's going on in that appliance. So who's pinging that appliance? Is there a rogue, hacker trying to come in and overload the port to get into that system? So they're monitoring it. And they want to say, if we're going to be responsible and give you, this money in case you get breached, we want to monitor the entire system. So we're seeing that in some of the networking folks and some of the payment processing folks. That's how when it's sort of a system within systems, the payments working within the point of sale or within the customer loyalty programs or security or digital signage within retail, that's how they're getting around it, because they want to section off that part of the enterprise and the network and manage it so that they're managing that one system and they won't let any rogues get into it.
Okay. I don't get exactly how to apply this to the cities, or
they're using it. So where we're seeing it now as payment processing, and this is why I brought up about kiosks, because we're seeing kiosks show up out on the street where you can go and let's say buy your train tickets.
Your hamburger, let's say.
That's right. For the place right down the street, you can do the payment right there. And so what they're saying is, if we're going to manage that part of the network, we want it secure. And that's where we're seeing it come into smart cities, is into the kiosk solutions that are all around accepting payment for some type of service. And it could be theater tickets, whatever.
Well, it's. I think there are some critical scenarios in that sense as well. And if you can find these third providers in order that can isolate these specific areas in the terms of payments and can offer you this guarantee, maybe we can even think about detaching them, just getting the information that you can get from them from these payments, but detaching it from the global access to the platform. So you are isolating the problem you may have in case of any leak because using of legacy systems in another part of the services, not to access to this kind of information that could be great of high, let's say, sensitive information.
Just.
Yeah, so I mean we're kind of in the middle here because we're signage, but I mean to give you an idea, we work in the UK. And we provide signage for the Met Police, Ministry of Defence, amongst others. And these people, as you can imagine, are very, very sensitive even internally for their own data. So we've had to work over the last year and a half on a number of objectives. But there's only so much that we can do. So in their scenario, actually we can almost kind of lock it down and give them a cast iron guarantee that we can control things. Where you've said, in the case of a kiosk, it gets much more difficult for us because we're dealing with an integration with third parties, with with people making card transactions. I mean, I'm not going to name the hamburger bar, and now kiosks aren't always internal. They're being used externally. They're in car park payments. So you can go into, for instance. When I'm checking out at the airport at Heathrow, I'm going into one of the kiosk areas there, and you've got literally hundreds of thousands of people giving across their card details there. They're external; they're not always perfectly security monitored. And you picked up on one area which is organised cyber terrorism. But actually, I think in the future, because of the amount of data that's out there and the amount of kiosks and the amount of areas where people are leaving their details, albeit within a network, that's just going to make it more and more attractive for smaller, more organised, not being the right word, but smaller, targeted criminals to access that data. So I can believe very much that there's companies out there that are going to make money out of servicing that fear within inside organisations. From our perspective, what we can only do is control the data that we capture, and to the point at which we deliver it. We can't be responsible for it from the other side. So we're in a kind of a tough position, a little bit between like a rock and a hard place.
Sure.
We'll look to form relationships and partner and integrate with those people who provide that additional level of security. but again, you know, to repeat, I'm not kind of trying to get out of it. I'm just being honest in saying that there's only we can only do that to a certain level. So we're very much reliant on other people. But yeah, definitely in the future, where we're going to have to form relationships with people that we can work proactively to provide that complete solution. And I think that in the future as well, something that will come in is not just for digital signage, but for kiosks and for other kind of data collection areas. There will be a new code, as it were, that comes from this over the next probably year or 2 years.
So would I be safe in assuming that you're probably performing more due diligence and picking your partners for some of these
absolutely,
solutions?
and it's a fluid solution at the moment, a fluid situation at the moment as well. So I mean, look, the laws are just kind of coming in, and we're on the end of it because our customers are insisting on that compliance. Okay, but we can only provide compliance for ourselves. We can't, you know, if it's in the case of a self-service kiosk and there's a contactless payment point there, you know, that's not our hardware, that's not our software. Sure, it integrates with us, but for instance, if there's something in there that we're not responsible for, and that results in, I don't know, 200,000 or 300,000 end users' data being lost, that's not down to our software. So it's difficult, and it's an area where we're having to spend time and effort doing that. And I think that all the signage companies are doing that, not just ourselves, because it's I think it's the way in the future. You won't go into a restaurant or into a bar or anywhere and pay cash anymore. I think everything will, you know, you'll be at the table.
Oh, the cash drawer people here don't like hearing that.
I tell you it's some way down the line, but I could see it being the case that you're paying on you're ordering your food off a
Sure.
menu on a table on an interactive screen, and you're putting your card down and you're paying, or you're opening a tab, or you're doing whatever you're doing. I mean, it's opening it up to you're opening a potential tin of worms, a tin of danger.
Sure.
Sorry, I can't give you good news.
No.
I just want to be honest with you. But there are opportunities there for sure.
We want the truth, not what we want to hear, right? Pedro?
Well, a lot of the companies on the market or on their organizations, the security system is an antivirus only, and normally the free versions. So they don't know nothing about security. They don't know nothing about how to be prepared for this new regulation. So the opportunity here is also to advise these companies what to do. So what tools they need to have regarding to protect from all these new regulations. So this is the opportunity that I can see regarding the regulations. But regarding the cyber attacks, it's true. I remember that a few years ago, the east part of North America,
Yes.
was power off. They told us that it was a technical problem.
They said it was a software bug in one of the stations.
Yeah.
That's what they said.
But no one knows who
Right.
provoked that software problem. A few months ago, also in London, the Heathrow airport was down because someone unplugged something. It was official version, but you don't know.
The rumour has it, for the record there, is in Terminal 5, that this came in through, not, thank God, through the digital signage network, but through the general fits and fits network, so
Right.
through the flight information system.
So that is a reality.
Sure.
And, but normally this does not come for the news because they want to cover these things.
So very similar, a couple of years ago in San Francisco, California, they were going through labor strike, and two disgruntled labor workers decided that worked for the traffic control to put a virus into the system and provided 2 days of gridlock in downtown San Francisco. So, yeah. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing all of you at dinner tonight. Thank you very much.